All
If
right.
you put on the Zoom screen, you
I'm not a
can.
Mac user. All right. Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Bradley Flam. I'm the director of the Office of Sustainability here at Westchester University. And I'm very glad to see those of you who are here in person with us in 255 Psych Student Union. And for those of you who have logged on via Zoom, our office is proud to sponsor this series of presentations with the Office for Research and Sponsored Programs and with the Sustainability Council's Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee. This is, I think, the 11th or 12th semester we've been doing this, and we're grateful for the ongoing support of our partner offices on campus. One quick reminder for those of you on Zoom, if you have not registered for the Office of Sustainability's weekly email bulletin, Amy Maxey will be posting a link where you can subscribe yourself, and I will set up a sign-up sheet here in Sykes for those of you in the in-person audience. So now, without further ado, I would like to thank our speaker today, Professor Jacqueline Alnes, and hand the virtual podium to her.
Thank you. And I'll make sure I share my screen. All right. So I just want to thank you all for being here today, and thank you to the Office of Sustainability, the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, and the Sustainability Council's Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee for inviting me. And an extra thank you to Brad Flam and Amy Maxey, who have been in correspondence with me and put up with my sometimes delinquent email skills for a while now. When I was invited to present, I had a moment of doubt where I wondered if my work intersected enough with sustainability to warrant me coming up and talking in front of all of you. But I think one beauty of sustainability, at least when we look at it through the lens of the UN's 19 Sustainable Development Goals, is that there's no part of our lives untouched by a need to imagine alternative futures. For me, my obsession is thinking about goal 3, which is good health and well-being, and the way that food plays a role in that. For the past 3 years, I've been working on a book called Fruit Cure that wrestles with these ideas. Today, I'm going to start by talking about how I got into my research in the first place and take you on a brief tour of the past to sort of examine how ideas of purity and what is natural, which seems so good and alluring on the surface, have turned sinister over the years and have the potential to be harmful if we don't think critically about where those ideas stem from. Yes, you have a question?
There are things covering.
There are, thank you. Is that better? A little bit? I don't know how to get rid of this. Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, I think it works.
Yeah.
Okay. If it becomes a problem, let me know. All right. Let's see. Okay, so I used to be a Division I athlete. Long story short, you can read the long version in my book. I got sick during my freshman year of college. A person who had experienced no significant health conditions my entire life until that point, I was suddenly affected by neurological episodes that left me dizzy with blurred vision and aphasic, meaning I repeated the same word or phrase for minutes on end. When I woke up after episodes, I didn't remember what had happened. Encouraged by my coach, the athletic doctor, and trainer, who all declared me sound, I tried desperately to make my way back into the body I had known my whole life, the body I could control down to the second of an interval split. I kept trying to run. As hard as I tried, it didn't work. My symptoms took over and I quit the team. Then for 2 years, I grieved. I took medication and I experienced no symptoms. I started to trust my legs and began running again. I obtained what I thought would be the perfect ending to my story. I ran a marathon, and the scene was just like what you see in every sports movie where someone overcomes pain or loss or whatever obstacle is in their way. I cried when I made my way up the last hill of the race, thinking, finally, I've returned to this body I know and this body that I've loved. How wrong I was. Just 2 months later, my symptoms returned stronger than ever. During my junior year, I dropped all of my classes but one and began using a wheelchair. The one I purchased was a travel chair, meaning that unless someone pushed me, I could not navigate the world on my own. When my roommates were gone, I spent afternoons in my bedroom browsing the internet, half in search of something I couldn't fully articulate. It was during one of those sessions that I found myself on a website featuring a bunch of spotty bananas in the left-hand corner of my screen, the words 30 bananas a day printed next to them. Curious, I clicked on the FAQs tab and read that the leaders of the website, Freely the banana girl and then partner durian rider, advocated for the consumption of a high-calorie, high-carbohydrate, low-fat, raw vegan lifestyle. They, as their website title suggests, advocated that followers eat a diet of 30 bananas or more per day. They labeled meat evil and set up a dichotomy between the pure good food, which was fruit, and everything else in the world. There was a tab on the website called Testify that I found myself coming back to day after day. I wanted so desperately for it to be true. People wrote in about being healed from eczema, ADD, depression, eating disorders, addiction, anxiety, vision problems, and polyps. They wrote about running farther than they ever had before, cycling incredible distances, losing weight, gaining energy, and feeling good every single day. They posted pictures of themselves with clear skin and toned muscle. To me now, the website looks sketchy. I mean, you can see it. And the language seems really cultish, but at the time I was a 20-year-old former athlete who was stuck sitting in my desk chair, and the website began to look something like hope. I watched Freely's YouTube videos for around 7 years after first finding her. At first, I didn't really understand why, but then I started asking questions. How had I, usually someone who's pretty cynical about believing in cures or miracles, almost fallen prey to the fruit diet? How had someone come up with a diet in the first place? Like, who was the first person to say, let's eat 30 bananas a day and see what happens? And what does it say about the medical systems in place that at the peak of Freely and durian riders' reign, thousands of people flocked to their videos for inspiration and advice? As I started doing research, I found fruit eaters from the past, and what surprised me most was that despite their absurdity, I felt at times like I related deeply to them. Though we span continents and eras, one thing unites us. We were all experiencing illness when we were called to the fruit. There's something about the fruit diet, in my mind, that keeps people believing they are on the brink of a breakthrough. If you just stick it out a little longer, you'll heal yourself. If you eat even cleaner than you already are, you'll feel like your old self again. One of the common refrains that many of the practitioners shared, and we'll take a tour of all the practitioners later, I promise, or at least some of the good ones, is that fruit was the most natural, pure food. Even the Bible had declared it so. Many of them based their eating habits around Genesis 1:29, in which God tells Adam and Eve, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food." The ways that purity, a desire to avoid or heal illness, and fruit intersect are rooted deeper than just one verse. The origins of the YouTube videos we see today can be traced all the way back to the late 1800s. I'll tell you a little story that might illustrate how people's present fascination with fruit came to be. In 1887, a woman named Patty E. Beard began experiencing a pain that was unrelenting. Her symptoms meant that she was unable to complete her household duties, read for more than 10 minutes, or to walk. She took a bath chair, a plush, padded version of a contemporary wheelchair, everywhere, and was confronted daily by newspaper ads insisting that she might be healed by products like Hughes's blood pills, fixes everything from dyspepsia to spleen distemper, and George's pile and gravel pills. As one patient testified, they saved me from the jaws of death. Patty ignored the ads and instead sought care where she thought she would be most likely to receive it, from an eminent physician. But one doctor turned to two, and then to a series of medical men who performed operations on her, prescribed medication, and left her experiencing the same pain she had been in before. After 7 long years of searching for a cure, Patty and her husband, Sidney H. Beard, who had literally hypnotized her repeatedly during their courtship, just for fun, fell under a different kind of spell. The pair attended a lecture presented by the Vegetarian Society in Exeter, in which the speaker told the crowd that it was beneficial to live without, quote, flesh food. From that night on, haunted by the suffering of animals, Patty and Sydney decided that never again would their, quote, lips be stained with the flesh and blood of our fellow creatures. At first, their decision was personal. On their new diet, they both felt better. In a column titled "Good News for the Afflicted," Patty wrote that she'd sold her bath chair after 6 months on the diet and took up bicycling instead. As time went on, neither Sydney or Patty required medical attention or spent a single day sick in bed. The couple grew enamored with the fleshless, bloodless diet that they believed had cured them of all their ills, and they began pressing their newfound way of life on loved ones. When family and friends dined at their house and finished their bowls of soup, they found "blood and fire" inscribed on the bottom, which served both as a call to Sydney's evangelical work and the Salvation Army, and also as a marker of his tremendous fervor for the things he believed in. He also had decorated his bathrooms and bedrooms with sheets, bath towels, and bath mats inscribed with the Salvation Army's motto. His fanaticism for religion began to meld with his passion for abstaining from flesh foods. His proselytizing soon extended far beyond the walls of his own home in Ilfracombe. At the Beacon, where he resided, Sydney took visits from leaders in the vegetarian movement, like J.I. Pendley and Josiah Oldfield. There, they strategized about how best to spread the good news. Backed by Sydney's financial power as a stockbroker, the Order of the Golden Age, a vegetarian organization rooted in Christianity, was reinstated in 1895. The intertwining of morality, appetite, and religion that pervades the Herald of the Golden Age, the monthly published newsletter of the order, is nothing new. Rather, in the Christian tradition, linking godliness, or a perceived lack thereof, and consumption harkens all the way back to the first book in the Bible, where Eve succumbs to temptation and eats the forbidden fruit. As religious scholar Michelle Mary Lelwick writes, Eve's lack of restraint reveals females' susceptibility to bodily cravings. St. Augustine, using Eve and others as examples, warned Christians not to fall prey to the desires of their flesh, and in the medieval times, Christian ascetics believed they could be closer to God if they denied themselves any corporeal cravings for food, sex, or even community with others. By emptying their physical bodies, they can make room for the Lord. While of course not everyone followed or believed in these teachings, and though the Order of the Golden Age was founded hundreds of years after the medieval times, it is interesting to chart the ways in which moral and religious judgment is imposed on food and bodies. The principle of abstaining from pleasurable consumption as a means of proving faithfulness, as well as serving as a marker of class, haunted English citizens enough to shape their dietary habits and expectations of appearance in the 18th and 19th century. In the hundreds of years leading up to the order's creation, the aesthetics of desirability had shifted considerably in England. In 1684, French physician Francois Bernier published New Division of the Earth by Different Species or Races of Man that Inhabit It, which is largely considered the first racial classification system created. In his text, as Sabrina Strings explains in Fearing the Black Body, Bernier attempted to distinguish Europeans from non-Europeans based on physical qualities and not without racial bias. Bernier clearly marks so-called European features as being superior to any other. Because of his classification system and the numerous responses published by other white European men in the years that followed, Strings writes, quote, "The racialized body became legible, a form of text from which racial superiority and inferiority were read. While once white women had been celebrated for their full figures, 1600 to 1815, quote, it was becoming part of the general zeitgeist that fatness was related to Blackness. Thus, it was treated as evidence of barbarism of a non-white affectation. Religious leaders, physicians, and philosophers alike chimed in with their thoughts on what a, quote, well-mannered women and men should eat. And much of their advice suggested that withholding from food and showing self-restraint, both through appetite and through thinness, was most becoming. Influenced by Christian asceticism, the insidious strain of racist depictions of African women that had flooded English scientific literature at the time, and the physical effects of English citizens having access to more sugar, alcohol, meat, and coffee than ever before, new forms of fad dieting were born. And while not all practitioners at the time would readily cite any moral, religious, or racist influences, the diets and our urgings were certainly shaped by cultural forces. One such example of this is George Sheen, who originally thought he would end up as a man of the church before switching career paths to medicine. After studying with Scottish physician Sir Archibald Pitcairn, he applied and was accepted to the Fellow of the Royal Society in 1702. A mirthful, kind, and humorous man by all written accounts, Dr. Sheen, after earning his medical title, often met with patients in coffee houses and split his time betwixt his patients and the punch bowl. As he writes, as a result of his lifestyle, he grew, quote, excessively fat, short-breathed, lethargic, and listless, and suffered from, quote, numerous illnesses, including autumnal intermittent fever, vertiginous paroxysm, vertigo, constant violent headaches, giddiness, lowness, anxiety, and terror. Rather than offer Dr. Sheen aid, his friends, quote, dropped off like autumnal leaves and continued partying without him. Alone and unable to cure his own ailing body despite his medical training, Dr. Sheen took a step back from his practice and moved by himself to the country. There, he tried purging both body and soul. He took mercury in order to induce vomiting and spent a lot of time contemplating how he had been living. He recognized that he had been chasing sensual pleasures and mere jollity rather than following God's will for his life. It was here, at his lowest spiritually and physically, that a surprising cure was delivered to him by an anonymous doctor, a milk diet. For some time, Sheen exclusively drank milk and ate fruit and vegetables. In his own words, he became, quote, lank, fleet, and nimble, and returned to his practice, where he not only offered patients treatments for their ailments, but also spread the gospel of milk. One of his patients, Lady Mary Wortley, lost weight by drinking, and I quote, half a pint of warm ass's milk in the morning and another dose of ass's milk at night. While the milk diet ended up not working out long-term for Dr. Sheen, he started drinking 2 or 3 pints of wine a day, 8 large dinners, and his weight climbed again. The experiment did shape the way he viewed food. Rather than continuing to swing from one extreme diet to another, Dr. Sheen allowed himself to enjoy milk, tea, coffee, bread, butter, mild cheese, fruits, nuts, and tender roots, including potatoes, turnips, and carrots. He no longer consumed wine or liquor, but sometimes allowed himself a glass of small cider. In comparison to his punch bowl days, he felt like a new man. He wanted others to feel well too, so he published an essay of health and long life that outlined his recommendations. Moderate exercise, 8 ounces of meat, and 12 ounces of vegetable for an ordinary man who doesn't do much manual labor, and no overuse of alcohol, though he makes clear that he is not against enlivening conversation, promoting friendship, comforting the sorrowful heart, and raising the drooping spirits by the cheerful cup. He emphasized a vegetable-forward menu, but left room for practitioners to eat meat in moderation. For someone writing in 1724, Dr. Sheen's treatise, which emphasizes prevention rather than miracle cures, is not bad, or at least better than the prescription of milk 3 times a day. Sheen's writings left a meaningful impact on other thinkers who followed, and the idea of vegetarianism took root in Great Britain in the early 1800s. Eager to share the benefits, both in terms of improving their health and relieving their consciences, vegetarians at the time published essays, articles, and books about their dietary choices. By the 19th century, Great Britain, there was infighting among the vegetarians. The Vegetarian Society split into 2 factions in 1888, the London Vegetarian Society, which was more stringent, and the Manchester Vegetarian Society, in which President Francis William Newman allowed members who occasionally ate chicken or fish. For a new vegetarian group to enter the scene successfully and gain members, it needed to up the ante. When the Order of the Golden Age was founded in 1895, it did just that. Rather than refer to themselves as vegetarians, like the other groups, they coined the term fruitarian. While contemporarily, the word fruitarian usually refers to someone who lives only on raw fruit, with some possible exceptions for greens or nuts. The word within the context of the Order of the Golden Age allowed followers to eat vegetables, fruits, cereals, cooked foods, and even dairy and eggs. At the time, by using fruitarian as a descriptor, the order hoped to distinguish their work from the fatism of vegetarianism, as they considered their, quote, sphere of work to be amongst a different class of people. In some ways, it can be said that their rebranding of vegetarianism was successful, at least in softening the public's opinion. In a 1914 issue of the Herald, Sidney Beard remarked, "When the Order of the Golden Age was founded in 1895, vegetarianism was ridiculed in almost every newspaper in the country and regarded as a mild form of insanity in almost every home. Now, almost every public journal is sympathetic and many are cooperating with us." While of course Beard's comments about his own organization should be taken with a grain of salt, the 1929 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica confirmed the influence of the order, stating, "Since about 1901, the Order of the Golden Age has come to the front of vegetarian societies." And this is where things get thorny. This is a picture of gout, by the way, a representation in art. Rather than just offering relief to the populace from, quote, joints and tissues choked by waste in uric acid, or, quote, the demon gout and his malign kindred. Through a diet alternative to the meat-heavy norm in England at the time, the order stressed that they were offering people salvation from moral failings as well, all through food. They believed that eating meat was the cause of a large proportion of the pain, disease, suffering, and depravity with which our race is cursed. While I'm sure that a vegetarian diet does work in people's lifestyles and help them feel better and happier, articles in the Herald in no way take into account cultural practices, class, disability, race, or access to food that might influence diet. Instead, so convinced of the moral sanctity of their fruitarianism, the leaders of the Order of the Golden Age not only continued proselytizing in England, but also set up international headquarters in South Africa. There, in a report that reeks of colonialism, the pioneers of the Order of the Golden Age gave, quote, lectures to natives and offered, quote, a Christmas appeal concerning humane diet. Echoing the racist travelogues and race classification systems of the time, there are also articles in the Herald that celebrate the conversion of, quote, mostly natives who had been converted from carnivorism through these native reformers were admittedly the best specimens of their race. Because they were so firm in their convictions about the righteousness of their food choices, in addition to the colonialist efforts in South Africa, members of the order pressed toward the idea of purity in alarming ways. For one, they began advertising for various naturopathy practitioners in the Herald. At the time, naturopathy, which offered alternative treatments like sun cures, fasting, hypnotism, and hydrotherapy, to name a few, was an attractive option for women, vegetarians, anti-vivisectionists, religious devotees, spiritual and mental healers, and anti-vaccinationists who shared a self-imposed outsider status. While in some ways the pairing of naturopathic treatments and vegetarianism seems like an organic fit, there's also a dangerous mistrust in science that underlies naturopathy. Two, the rhetoric of naturopathy and the order began to lean toward individual responsibility for wellness. So you alone were responsible for your health. In one article titled Hygienic Christianity, Sidney Beard writes that real followers of Christ should feel obligated to relieve human suffering, and that it was each person's responsibility to purify themselves through food in order to prevent disease as well as cure it. The problem with purity is that there's never an end to it, rarely a way to reasonably quantify how pure something is, and at worst, it's a word loaded with racist, classist, sexist, moral ideas that are unattainable for anyone. The Herald's proclamation that the great scientific fact that purity of food tends to promote purity of character was well known to our ancient teachers, or Dr. J.H. Kellogg, a vocal eugenicist, insistent that for the making of pure blood, the first essential is pure food, sets up a false promise of wellness that practitioners then spend days, weeks, months, or their entire lives chasing. The insistence on purity as a necessity pitted practitioners against their own willpower. If they failed to keep up with the fruitarian diet, it was their shortcoming, and any illness, weight gain, or moral fault after that could be attributed to their lack of commitment to the right diet, in the thin path of salvation offered by Christian leaders. And worse, if they committed entirely to the preachings of a teacher who had no real credentials, they might lose their health or their life. In no way am I trying to argue here against veganism, against naturopathy, or even against fruitarianism. For some people, eating fruit does seem to work. But what I am interested in is how these ideas of purity have seeped into the present day, sometimes in a dangerous way. Just a generation before Freely and Durian Rider, my friends from YouTube, started posting about the power of fruit, there were an array of fruitarians who preached about how fruit had healed them and how morally it was the right diet. There was Arnold Ehret, who in his mucusless diet healing system insists that fruit and greens were the only right food, which he knows not through scientific testing, but because God declared it to be. Ehret believed that doctors intentionally told their patients to eat destructive foods so that they would stay in business, believed that all people had the power to be disease-free if only they followed his dietary suggestions, and believed that if a child was born ill, it was because of a combination of a, quote, filthy, I'm sorry for this, mostly constipated colon and an unclean bladder of a civilized mother. Women, he believed, should aspire to Madonna-like holy purity by getting rid of the monthly flow of impure blood and other waste. Most alarmingly, though we would label this as amenorrhea now and consider it cause for a nutritional and/or mental health intervention of some sort, Ehret bragged that every one of my female patients reported their menses as becoming less and less than a 2, 3, 4 months intermission until finally disappearing. Even worse, what he fails to mention in his diet book was that he was eating cake daily, so practitioners were expected to keep their bodies clean while he was allowing himself perfectly normal indulgences. Then there's Joanna Brandt, who refused to get tested by doctors but insisted that she had stomach cancer. After fasting and fasting to no avail, a tenet of naturopathy, she discovered grapes, which she insisted made the senses become abnormally acute, dim eyes brighten, faded hair takes on new gloss, the lifeless, hopeless voice becomes vibrant, magnetic, and the complexion clears. She set sail on July 4th from South Africa, a sign, she felt, because she would be liberating the American people from ill health and poor diets by spreading her grape cure. And then, there's probably my favorite, Cornelius Valkenburg de Villiers Dreyer, who had come to the field of medicine, if what he performed in any way can be called medicine, in a roundabout way. Cornelius was raised on a farm just outside Cape Town. He played football and tennis and claims that as a teenager, he could lift 103 pounds above his head with one hand. In 1901, when he was around 19, his father died of Bright's disease, and a dropsical condition. In today's terms, those illnesses might be better known as kidney inflammation and congestive heart failure, which even the best specialists in Cape Town could not heal him from. Reeling from the loss, Cornelius might have taken inspiration from his elder brother Thomas, who was actually a medical student at the United Friedrich University in Germany. While Cornelius attended the National College in Cape Town and started work at the Bank of Africa after graduation, he patched together his own medical studies of sort on the side. He soon realized that a life of numbers would not satisfy him, resigned from his position at the bank, and traveled to Australia in 1911. He started going by Robert de Villiers Dreyer. Whether that was to buffer himself legally from his former name or just a preference is unclear. In Australia, Cornelius, aka Robert, opened the Valkenburg Naturopathic Hospital, began publishing a newspaper, and in a moment that was probably significant to him because of his history with his father, claimed to have cured a clergyman who had been suffering from asthma and Bright's disease. In addition to healing, he harmed. 2 patients died under his care. He insisted on fasting them, convinced that they needed to be purified from sin. And neither guilt nor a stint in prison helped him realize that perhaps his methods were dangerous. Instead, he became more radicalized. He believed that if you were ill, it was a sign that you had transgressed and consumed too many popular toxins. He believed that if you died ill and in pain, you deserved it, you had sinned. He equated natural food with moral goodness. His phrase was, a natural man is a healthy man and a healthy man is a moral man, and insisted that if girls and boys were allowed to partake in any food but what was natural, They would cock their ears for smutty yarn and steal clandestine glances at the legs and shaking breasts of the flapper. When Cornelius saw people drinking milk, a toxin, he says, "I could weep like Jesus for the destiny of mankind." He's a little drama queen. While Cornelius's ideas might seem extreme or far-fetched, the rhetoric he uses about natural food and purity of the body and mind and the capability individuals had to heal themselves if only they put forth the right amount of effort, earned him a spot as a sort of mentor to a woman 40 years his junior, Essie Honeball, who he married, called his guinea pig, and instructed her to eat fruit and only fruit for the remainder of her days. Even after he died, she did, and she became one of the foremost fruitarians in South Africa until her death in 2013. This leads us back to present day and to the question of so what? What does all of this history have to do with what's going on today? And why does it matter, especially from a sustainability standpoint? One thing to note is the actual sustainability of a fruitarian-based lifestyle. While many fruitarians argue that their approach is best for the animals and planet, I interviewed dozens of practitioners who have left the lifestyle over the years because of harms to their own health. After several years on the diet, people began experiencing issues with digestion, energy levels, hormones, their teeth, and more. The lifestyle can also be extremely isolating socially and can be difficult for people in different climates to fully participate in without shipping fruit all the way across the world. I interviewed someone in Canada, for example, who bought like 3 boxes of mangoes only to have them all rot at the same time because they'd just been refrigerated for so long. Thinking about sustainability in this space means acknowledging that place, access to resources, cultural histories, and more are related to people's ability to participate in different diets. It also highlights the need for us to distinguish between different kinds of plant-based eating and raise red flags when people utilize arguments of for the animals or the planet, or claim a food to be the most, quote, natural, which are claims we might be drawn to in order to proliferate their own scientifically and nutritionally unsupported message. Thinking about the population of, sorry, this is my email. I need to close it. And, all right, we're back. Thinking about the population of people this extreme form of fruitarian preys upon leads me also to think about how interconnected so many of the UN's sustainability goals are. If we are sick and we feel that the medical institutions in place are unaffordable or do not offer clear answers or solutions to our problems, we are left vulnerable to the many scams and schemes that have been around since the beginning of time. People who offer hope in the shape of diets that really do more harm than healing, all under the guise of what is natural or pure. And thinking about the racism too, that shaped the aesthetics and lack of inclusiveness early in vegan or vegetarian spaces, I think it's important too to note that the boundaries there haven't dissolved. As Khushbu Shah writes in The Vegan Race Wars, How the Mainstream Ignores Vegans of Color, veganism has existed in communities of color through Rastafarianism, Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Black Hebrew Israelites for a longer time than it has been coined and commodified by white people. But those histories have often been ignored by mainstream media and white vegan influencers. The whiteness of veganism, as Lisa Betty, a PhD candidate in history at Fordham University, writes, is historically being unequivocally colonial, white-centered supremacist, and elitist, has produced insidious results in present day. One is the use of racist language employed by PETA and other vegan organizations. PETA, according to Tara Roeder, has relied on the objectification of women and people of color or the employment of fat phobia in its campaigns against animal cruelty. And as Isaiah Hernandez writes, until people are willing to, quote, interrogate their own white supremacy and stop, quote, ignoring the effects of colonization and how it is interconnected to the oppression of humans and animals, nothing meaningful will change. To imagine a more sustainable future where more people can access materially, bodily, and with a sense of inclusivity, more plant-based spaces means taking a hard look at the rhetoric, policies, leadership, and more of the spaces we might participate in and make change where possible. There is so much more, but I'll put up a list of resources that I used for this chapter in particular. So these are 3 books that were They're really great. If you haven't checked any of them out, there's one about naturopathy. Fearing the Black Body is a lot to do with the history of race that I was talking about. And then Shameful Bodies is sort of like the connection of religion and bodies, which I think is really fascinating. And then I'll put this slide up, which has my email, which you guys can't see. And my book comes out next November. So if you are at all interested in any of this stuff and want to go on some like more wild rabbit hole rides, it is there for you, for your interest. But do you all have any questions? I'm happy to answer pretty much anything if you have anything. Yeah, sorry, in the back row.
So, are you saying that like the current like situation with veganism now is too white? And if so, how is that the case?
So he asked the question, am I saying that veganism is too white right now? Is that the question?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And how is
And how is it white?
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily like, I don't ever want to talk about all of veganism. I feel like veganism is sort of like religion where everyone has like a subculture and a subsect, and there are like so many different branches. And so I never want to like put them all under one umbrella and be like, this is who a vegan is, or this is how vegans work. But during my research, what I was really curious about was, obviously I spent a lot of time on 30bananas-a-day.com, which is high carb fruitarians. So they're their own little sect of space. I noticed that I've only interviewed one person of color from that movement, and she was the only one who could speak to me from like 10 years worth of research. And so I became curious in my own mind about like, well, where does that whiteness come from? Like, I don't think the fact that it's almost an entirely white space comes from nowhere, if that makes sense. Like, why is it that way? And so I think for me, that question led me to thinking about the ways that some of those original spaces were not inclusive and how that might have trickled down in certain strains of veganism or certain subsects of plant-based eating. And so, yeah, I'm not saying all of it. I'm just saying like, that's a curiosity, a point where I was like, I wonder why that is the way it is. And it seems like that is a rational sort of trickle down effect that's permeated. Does that make sense at all or help?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you had your hand up in the back too.
Did you wind up eating 30 bananas a day?
That's a great question. No. Did I end up eating 30 bananas a day is the question for all you on Zoom. No, I did not. I ended up in a really terrible pattern of disordered eating. And so a lot of the book, which I obviously can't fit into 30 minutes, is looking at the intersection between a diet like this and preying on vulnerable teens who might be out of an eating disorder or looking for a way of healing. The message that they give on this diet is the like holy grail of our culture, which is you can eat all you want and you can still be thin. The premise that Freely uses to sell this diet is her body. So all of her videos, she's wearing a crop top. She has like 6-pack. She's wearing the most low-rise tights you can possibly find. Her boyfriend is handling the camera and asks her to like turn for the camera and asks them to show us her stomach almost every video. And so there's this really baked in sense of like thinness is the holy grail, but you can eat as much as you want. And so for me, it never actually panned out that I was fruitarian. I hate following the rules too much for that, but it did turn into the rhetoric of like what foods were off limits, like oils were off limits. I got so deep into that sort of like echo chamber of these things are good, these things are bad, that they just seeped into my life in really interesting, weird, terrible ways. So yeah, so that's part of the book too, is just sort of examining like, even if you aren't fruitarian, like how do we see these things show up in other spaces? And what does that mean for all of us who might be vulnerable in some way to these messages?
There might be questions.
Oh yeah.
Or you might ask them to unmute themselves.
Yeah, if you all have questions in the Zoom, let me know. Yeah.
So I thought it was really cool about finding those people that she found and bringing to light their like I wouldn't say evolution, but, that their ideas, I mean, they weren't entirely, like bad ideas, but I think that the African, way that they were coming from, because some of them were from there or visiting there or part of it, they were, I don't know that part of the background, but, in Africa, because I took African politics and because I have a good idea about health food, they have like a way of culturally putting food together that is absolutely amazing. Put it into that sense that they're the native sense, they know what they're doing, they know how to make a certain combination of fruits and protein. Because you can't just do fruits, you have to have protein, of course, green leaves are protein, but so I think what is really cool is that your presentation, it shows like a revolutionary aspect of and cultural aspect of how we can eat better and we can heal and overcome I myself overcome so many neurological issues and addictions in my past by taking out the white sugar, putting in agave, or putting in bananas and mixing it with almond butter, or putting in oil in there so that the almond butter digests. Because sometimes people don't have the enzymes in their body just to go from a meat diet all the way to past extremism. So sometimes, like you said, mixing it up and allowing that building to put it in scientific, effort in there will actually work, and I think that you brought a cultural light to your presentation that not only brings diversity into the issue, but it keeps everybody together, gathering and putting the light on vegetarianism, veganism. I haven't done veganism my entire life, but I've had like times where I have and put in really hard situations and challenges where I was on a bike for 15 years. And the time that I did do the vegan, I was so happy. It didn't matter what anybody told me I had to do or visit or go the mile. I was happy because of the first presentation of lady on her bike. I was feeling good. So anything that pressured me or put me in anxiety, I didn't have that extra anxiety because I was feeling better. So you're totally on target.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm glad it resonated.
That's recovery.
Oh, thanks.
It's
Yeah.
totally awesome. I understand kind of take it, like, get frustrated. Get up and keep going.
It's true.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm guessing in college you ran cross country, right?
Yeah, I ran cross country and track.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to cope with the fact that you couldn't I guess compete? How long did that take you to get over that, I guess?
So the question was, how long did it take me to get over that I could not run anymore? I think that's also part of the book is I think what I lacked when I was in undergrad and what I lacked, I guess even still now for the most part, is like someone who is just like, hey, it's okay to chill. It's okay to just do it for fun. It's okay to take 2 months off if your body's not feeling like moving. It's okay. My coach in college was pretty all or nothing. She would push, like, if you had an injury, she'd be like, you're still going. It was pretty much like you do or you're done with the team kind of thing. So when I look back on, why I continued trying to compete when I was like literally not okay, I remember that was my identity and that was my source of like validation. And so I want my book to be one where I don't end up winning a marathon at the end. I want it to be more nuanced than that, where like I'm just kind of I have fun with it, but like also I listen to my body now, and that took me a long time to learn. And I haven't heard many sports narratives that just say that in the end, like it's okay to not be okay sometimes. Still, it's okay. Same with my illness. Like I've not triumphed over it entirely. It still happens sometimes. And that's fine. Like it's part of my life and I manage it. And it's like something that I think is a narrative that we need more of, which is just like we're all kind of dealing, or even just dealing with the ghost of the thing, So I think it's a really great question, because I think we don't talk about athletes retiring. We don't talk about the sadness that comes after. We don't talk about like what happens when you don't go to practice anymore every day. Like, who are you?
Yeah.
It's like freaky, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's all stuff that I hope is in there to like reach other people in that way. Yeah.
Could I suggest you stop sharing your?
Oh, yeah, for
screen?
sure. Yeah.
That way.
That's a great idea.
People who are on Zoom might be able to more easily.
Oops,
Let's see.
why?
Yeah.
I don't know why this is not working. Just like, oh wait, here, maybe this is better. Okay, my computer is like not wanting to do this right
What's
now.
the name of your book?
It's called Fruit Cure. And oh yeah, I think it's not shared anymore.
Okay, good.
So I think
I thought, some of the people on Zoom might unmute themselves and pose a question if they had one.
yeah.
I noticed that when you were like going, I guess there was it's like we did look at your paper over, so how like long did it take you to prepare for this? Because do you like remember a lot of the stuff like just by memory, I guess?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I right now am in my last draft of this book. And so that means that all of Christmas break, all that I did, winter break, all I did was do this book. And it's due at the end of February, so I'm about to go back into it again during the semester. So I kind of live there half the time right now. So yeah, it is. And I also just love them. Like, it's very strange, but as I've gone, all of the people that I've gotten to write about, even though I've never met them, I feel this strange connection to, like, I've found commonalities between me and them, which I hope has helped me write a book that's more nuanced and empathetic to them than just like, it's kind of funny on the surface, like all of this stuff that I write about, but I hope in some way that it's also coming across that like I care about them and that I think that their desires are human and that I relate to a lot of them. So yeah, it's a great question though. Thank you. Any other questions?
I was intrigued by your discussion of the rhetoric of using the words natural and pure and relating that to an anti-science perspective and a religious and spiritual focus of some of the practitioners and the advocates of this. I wonder if you've come to any conclusions about how that connects to this idea of sustainability, in which an appeal to science is often part of the conversation.
Mhm.
And you're writing about people advocating diets and lifestyles that are sometimes explicitly rejecting science.
I mean, I think for me, I guess like it started, I had roommates in college that were vegan. And so I was always curious, like, well, what does that mean? And they would always tell me about how it was better for the world and the environment and themselves. And so I was really curious about those things to know, like, well, is that true? And like, where did you learn that information from? And I think that the line is like so thin between good information that helps us know how to care for ourselves in the world, and then people who prey on that. And it's really hard when you're someone who's like vulnerable on the other side of a screen, or you like end up down an Instagram rabbit hole that like starts to put all of the things around you that maybe you like slowly start sneaking more and more and more into this sort of anti-science guru version of things, rather than like, here's the actual truth of the matter kind of thing. I am interested in helping people identify those markers so that they can make more empowered, informed decisions for themselves and for other people and for the animals in the earth, if that's what they're interested in, if that makes sense. I guess through my research, what I get most mad about is when I see people experiencing great deals of harm, or like spending there's a guy currently who has had 2 people die under his care. He's like modern. He lost his license in 1990 in Florida for being a chiropractor. You can fast with him today for $7,000 for a week, and people still do, and people still post about. And he's a naturopath. He believes in fasting. He believes in high carb raw veganism. And so it makes me mad that the same things that you see in like the 1800s as being like sold to people as here's how you better yourself are still sold for like massive amounts of money now. And so I guess one of my goals is just to like move us all a little, or like help whoever I can move in a direction of like, how do you identify the difference between those two things? Because they seem so similar sometimes when you're looking at these spaces. I don't know. Does that answer it at all?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a single answer.
Yeah.
Looks like.
Yeah, Cheryl.
Hi, sorry, I'm dealing with this one here. But I'd like to follow up that question because one of the things I was thinking as you were presenting like this historical outline was some of these folks are definitely predators, but some of these folks are like true believers. I mean, how did you judge that line or where did you find that line? So if you could say something about that line, I'd appreciate it.
That is a great question. It's something that I struggled a lot with while writing, to the point where my editor made a note where for most of the book, I think I relate myself to some of these people. And she finally made a note where she was like, you need to stop because there's this point where they become predatory and I don't think you're that. And so it was interesting for me to have to do that. It is though true that like for Freely and Durian Rider, for example, the YouTubers, when they started out, you can watch their earliest videos and it's a grainy footage of them sitting out at a durian market, just eating durian together and enjoying each other's company. And like, that is, they truly at that stage, I believed that this was the best life for them and that other people could benefit and that the animals would be saved and that the earth would be saved. Like, I genuinely believe that they believed that. But then I think the sinister, interesting part is that as soon as you add to that profits, and as soon as you add to that, then this has to be your identity in order to continue getting those profits. And then you get into the parts that most of the people I talked about today lied in their books, where they say you have to do this, and then they are literally all. Essie Honiball drank pints of milk. She would go into her car and just drink pints of milk and then take herself to the top of a mountain and say, I can't do this anymore, I'm bad, I have to go back to the fruit diet. So she would like stumble in her journey, but they don't write that on the page. I like found that out through interviewing biographers and through like stealthy, sneaky ways of being like, here are ways that all of these people have fallen. I think it's more honest if we say you're a nuanced human being who maybe couldn't access the food you needed at that moment and you had to go somewhere else, or you do the best with what you have, or you live in Canada in the tundra and you cannot sustainably eat 30 mangoes a day for a whole month. Like, that's just not okay. So I think, yeah, part of it is, I did look at that more in the book of like, where do these things come from and when does it become predatory? And yeah, I think depending on the person, it really changes. It changes based on like who they were, their level of desperation, how much they profited from what they were telling. Some of them just wrote fun books for the sake of being like, here's a fruit thing. And I'm like, well, is that really that harmful if you're doing it and you're just, you know, touting your book? I don't know. So yeah.
And just a quick follow-up, has this changed your relationship with fruit?
Fruit? I don't think so. I think I've definitely purchased more fruit items and for my like general life. So I have like a banana vase and I have a lot of fruit themed planners, you know, stuff like that where I'm into it.
Sweater.
Yeah, sweater. Just, you know, like really into the on theme thing, but no, it hasn't like shaped or ruined my relationship with fruit in any way. And also I just want to note it's 12:54 in case anyone has to go, but I'm happy to stick around if you all have more questions.
Another question.
Yeah.
So you brought up some like amazing points about how things are changing and how like committees like this are great because we can get together and help with changes in the community. Like I've been to a lot of places in my past and I always saw the salad bar in these places were like the #1 key to like just keep going because you know you can't eat pizza every day and you can't. So between like institutions and like schools and kids or for like people going through addiction programs and stuff like that. Those are the changes that I think sustainability councils and universities can help also, because when you are put into those situations or kids are growing up in public schools, that's where the choices are, that's where their bodies are developing, and that's where our mind is redeveloped. So putting in like fruit and adding in vegetables and having that choice in the first place, like I think you guys had a vegan restaurant. I think those kind of choices are like awesome. That was one of the reasons I wanted to come to this school. I was like, that is great. And then now we have, if you check out some of the grocery stores, they have these new plant protein, which is like a plant substitute, and it doesn't have gluten and all kinds of stuff in it that will bind you up. So they're making new changes and adding protein for athletes and for people that run track so long.
It's cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
So I totally.
That's awesome. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
On my next notes, I'm gonna send you my Dr. David, my advisor.
Awesome. Yeah,
we're
that's
working
great.
Together on supporting this.
I have one last comment.
Yeah.
Like